before we finish tonight, let's look at a few more things to tie this all together so you can see that this is absolutely what they've been pushing forever. We're going to, as we watch this video, I'm going to stop periodically to make some small comments to explain everything I've been showing you, the symbolism, the everything this guy's going to show versus everything I've shown you already. They're literally repackaged and repushing ancient Vedic theology. That's Brahmin worship that they're going to be pushing to the world as science.
In 1919, a virtually unknown German mathematician named Theodor Kaluza suggested a very bold and, in some ways, very bizarre idea. He proposed that our universe might actually have more than the 3 dimensions that we are all aware of. That is, in addition...
He proposed it, but he's just reproposing it after Vedic theology.
In addition to left, right, back, forth, and up, down, Kaluza proposed that there might be additional dimensions of space that, for some reason, we don't yet see. Now, when someone makes a bold and bizarre idea, sometimes that's all it is. Bold, bizarre, but it has nothing to do with the world around us. This particular idea, however, although we don't yet know whether it's right or wrong, and at the end I'll discuss experiments which in the next few years may tell us whether it's right or wrong, this idea has...
Now remember, this is 2005, so this is right when CERN is being built. Remember what we talked about from all these movies being shown to us in the 80s, like 12 Monkeys, which was a machine looking just like CERN, having to do with sending someone through time.
Has had a major impact on physics in the last century and continues to inform a lot of cutting-edge research. So I'd like to tell you something about the story of these extra dimensions. So where do we go? To begin, we need a bit of backstory. Go to 1907. This is a year when Einstein is basking in the glow of having discovered the special theory of relativity and decides to take on a new project to try to understand fully the grand pervasive force of gravity. Imagine space as a substrate of all there is. Einstein said space is nice and...
So does this look familiar, guys? This is about 8 years before the Interstellar movie, where he goes into this 3-dimensional bad-looking library that's like a 3-dimensional labyrinth to the 5th dimension so he can try to talk to his daughter.
Flat, if there's no matter present. But if there is matter in the environment, such as the sun, it causes the fabric of space to warp, to curve, and that communicates the force of gravity. Even the Earth warps space around it. Now look at the moon. The moon is kept in orbit, according to these ideas, because it rolls along a valley in the curve.
So this is pretty hilarious to me because like the whole premise of general relativity, which is what he's trying to visualize here from Einstein's theory, is that the gravitational body is caused space-time to warp and therefore create the gravitational pull around it. And that's how they get away with gravity, which is a non-attractive force, which isn't even a real force anyway. That's how they get away with explaining the idea of gravity being an attractive force. But what's so funny is think about what we just saw, even with his animation, which is intellectually dishonest. He started out showing an actual grid pattern, 3-dimensional, up, down, left, right, but then he switched it to a 2D pattern, a flat plane for these things to bend and roll on. But there's no rolling on something if you're in a 3-dimensional substrate that had actual matter. I mean, it's just, no, it's all this nonsense. This is all thought. These are all thought experiments, theories. I want you to notice how many times this guy says theories.
Curved environment that the sun and the moon and the earth can all create by virtue of their presence. If we go to a full frame view of this, the earth itself is kept in orbit because it rolls along a valley in the environment that's curved because of the sun's presence. That
no, it doesn't.
Is this new idea about how gravity actually...
What you just saw was a 1980s Tron version representation of heliocentric sun worship. Helios worship
works. So Kaluza said to himself, Einstein has been able to describe gravity in terms of warps and curves in space, in fact space and time to be more precise. Maybe I can play the same game with the other known force, which was at that time known as the electromagnetic force. We know of others today, but at that time that was the only other one people were thinking about. You know, the force responsible for electricity and magnetic attraction and so forth. So Kaluza says, maybe I can play the same game. And
the theory, the force responsible for everything we actually observe. Yeah, electromagnetics. Uh, Cracks me up how he's trying to denigrate it as some like subpar theory that, oh, there's this other force out there. Yeah. And what was he going to do with that one? So this other guy thought, well, Einstein's got his idea, and what if I applied Einstein's idea to my understanding of electromagnetism, which was the dominant and understanding of all physics until Einstein came out with his thought experiment called special relativity. And then he had to change it later because it was debunked to general relativity.
Describe electromagnetic force in terms of warps and curves. That raised a question. Warps and curves in what? Einstein had already used up space and time, warps and curves, to describe gravity. There didn't seem to be anything else to warp or curve. So Kaluza said, well, maybe there are more dimensions of space. He said, if I want to describe one more force, maybe I need one more dimension. So he imagined that the world had 4 dimensions of space, not 3. And imagined that electromagnetism was warps and...
Listen to this carefully, guys. He imagined that it had 4, not 3. He imagined.
Curves in that 4th dimension. Now here's the thing. When he wrote down the equations describing warps and curves in a universe with 4 space dimensions, not 3, he found the old equations that Einstein had already derived in 3 dimensions. Those were for gravity. But he found one more equation because of the one more dimension. And when he looked...
Yeah, it's called adding a new variable to an equation. So then you can solve for it. Like it's not like he's discovering the fabric of reality. He's literally, this is why people understand math. He's literally just adding new variables into an equation, and then he has to solve for the new variable. Like, it's just...
Looked at that equation. It was none other than the equation that scientists had long known to describe the electromagnetic force. Amazing. It just popped out. Now, but for those of us who are a little bit more practically minded, 2 questions immediately arise from his observation. Number 1, if there are more dimensions of space, where are they? We don't seem to see them. And number 2, does this theory really work in detail when you try to apply it to the world around us? Now, the first question was answered in 1926 by a fellow named Oscar Klein. He suggested that dimensions might come in 2 varieties. There might be...
He suggested they might come in 2 varieties. He's trying to solve a theoretical problem from a guy 10, 20 years before him, and he comes around with another theory. He suggested that it might work this way.
Big, easy to see dimensions, but there might also be tiny curled up dimensions, curled up so small, even though they're all around us. So if we take a look, say, at space itself.
So did you hear what he just said? The other guy came along later. Doesn't matter what his name is. He came along later and said, what if I add a new theory to your incomplete theory? I can add some more information, some more theoretical information. And what if each universe what if there was smaller electromagnetic atoms rolled up and inside of the big ones?
I can only show, of course, 2 dimensions on a screen. Some of you guys will fix that one day. But anything that's not flat in the screen is a new...
As he immediately zooms into 3-dimensional concept.
Dimension goes smaller, 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 and way down.
So what did we just talk about? What was the story from the ancient King Ramana, or whatever his name was, from the Vedic texts? Was that Hanuman, the monkey-faced dude, god of ancient India, could make himself smaller and smaller and smaller and go into the fabric of reality where he met the serpent god inside there to get the ring of this king that he kept dropping his ring every day. What a troll. Just kept dropping his ring every day. He became Ant-Man. Just like we're seeing this animation here, like you've seen in modern Marvel movies with much better graphics, they show you the same process where he's becoming Ant-Man to go deeper and deeper into the fabric of an atom, basically.
Down in the microscopic depths of space itself, this is the idea. You could have additional curled up dimensions. Here is a little shape of a circle, so small that we don't see them. But if you were a little ultra microscopic ant walking around, you could walk in the big dimensions that we all know about. That's like the grid part. But you could also access the tiny curled up dimension that's so small that we can't see it with the naked eye or even with any of our most refined equipment, but deeply tucked.
Did you guys hear that? That you can't see with the naked eye or even our most refinedly detailed equipment. You can't see, you can't observe it, you can't be measured or tested. It's fake, it's not real, it's imagined. This is CGI, and poor CGI from 2005.
Into the fabric of space itself, the idea is there could be more dimensions, as we see there. Now, perform a lot of cutting edge research. I mean, some of you guys, smaller, 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 and way down in the microscopic depths of space itself, this is the idea. You could have additional curled up dimensions. Here is a little shape of a circle, so small that we don't see them. But if you were a little ultra microscopic ant walking around, you could walk in the big dimensions that we all know about. That's like the grid part. But you could also access
the grid part. It's always a grid. What we talk about, the loom, the interior of the time machines. Here's the grid. Here's the circles. You see the symbolism, guys? Here's the grid. Here's the circles. What does that grid look like? Like a labyrinth? Except this is one you have to imagine. You can't build and see this one. This is a labyrinth for your mind.
Tiny curled up dimension that's so small that we can't see it with the naked eye or even with any of our most refined equipment, but deeply tucked into the fabric of space itself, the idea is there could be more dimensions, as we see there. Now,
the idea is that there could be more dimensions. It's all theory.
That's an explanation about how the universe could have more dimensions than the ones that we see. But what about the second question that I asked? Does the theory...
Yes, Evan in the chat saying the Higgs field was proposed as a grid. Also, yeah, that's what they talk about with CERN and the idea of finding the Higgs boson particle, which is directly considered the God particle, which can control reality, possibly lead to other dimensions, possibly time travel.
Actually work when you try to apply it to the real world. Well, it turns out that Einstein and Klutz and many others worked on trying to refine this framework and apply it to the physics of the universe as was understood at the time.
Guys, let me translate that for you. Einstein and Klutz and this other guy worked to refine this framework of their theories. That's called Dungeons and Dragons for scientists. Like, that's like, it's all thought. It's a thought game, and they're rolling the dice to see what works. It's a thought game. This is just, I mean, these are dudes getting paid to sit around and think, just like in ancient Greece, where it was their custom, as we read in Acts, where Paul went into Athens, and there was, that's where Socrates used to hang out. That's where all the Plato, that's where all the people used to hang out, just sit around and think thoughts. I wish I had the clip set up. One of my favorite shows, man, is a show called Community, and it's a silly show, and it's came out like 2009. And there's this character in there that's played by Donald Glover, and he plays a really dumb character, and they're all at a community college, and like in the third season, John Goodman is trying to get him to join the air conditioner repair school, which is part of a different annex on the grounds of the community college. And Troy is the Donald Glover character, and he's like, I don't want to work on air conditioner repair. I don't want to do plumbing. I just want to sit with my friends and watch TV and think thoughts. You're just like, yeah, this is what the ancient Greeks did. The sophists, the sophistries of the ancient Greeks, the philosophers, the vain philosophies that Paul warns you about in Colossians 2, not to be held captive and deceived by vain philosophies. These are thought experiments. These are people that can't prove, observe, test, or demonstrate anything. And they're getting millions of dollars thrown at them, just like they've never come up with a quantifiable, effectual, beneficial anything from CERN. And countries are building particle accelerators at rapid speeds. They're throwing hundreds of billions of dollars to build particle accelerators in all kinds of countries on the idea of trying to find a way to control reality, which includes time. And there's a reason for this. Thank you for the super chats, guys. I really appreciate that. Yeah, Theo Creations, I appreciate you, brother. Hopefully it's helping. And there's a reason. There's a reason this is not just leading into a deception about a fake coming alien visitor of panspermia. It's deeper than that. They want to control reality. They want to manipulate the fabric of time, like we talked about two episodes ago in our Cult of Saturn episode. Just like they're trying to break into the communicative aspects of the ether itself, the instantaneous, all recording aspects. They also want to break into the fabric of vibration. In the beginning, God spoke and things were created. They want to break into the fabric of reality. And he's going to go on here in a few minutes with another demonstration, a bad animation to show what they believe and what they're trying to teach, which is just a copy paste from ancient Hinduism about what's happening inside of atoms at the very core fundamental building block of reality.
And in detail, it didn't work. In detail, for instance, they couldn't get the mass of the electron to work out correctly in this theory. So many people worked on it, but by the 40s, certainly by the 50s, this strange but very compelling idea of how to unify the laws of physics had gone away. Until something wonderful happened in our age. In our era, a new approach to unify the laws of physics is being pursued by physicists such as myself, many others around the world. It's called superstring theory, as you...
A new approach, which is actually just... Let me translate for you. What he's calling a new approach is, he meant to say, he said it wrong. He meant to say a copy-paste approach from ancient Hinduism about Brahma being connected by a string to Vishnu, who sits on the tulip that controls reality and time, connected to the goddess Kali. Like, they're just using the wrong words, but they're replaying the same ancient Hindu Vedic religious philosophies.
We're indicating, and the wonderful thing is that superstring theory has nothing to do at first sight.
Do you remember the strings that the Moirai, the Greek goddesses of fate, would have the strings of a person's life that they controlled, that ultimately Zeus controlled?
With this idea of extra dimensions, but when we study superstring theory, we find that it resurrects the idea in a sparkling new form. So let me...
Resurrects it from 5,000 years ago, not from 1910.
just tell you how that goes. Superstring theory, what is it? Well, it's a theory that tries to answer the question, what are the basic, fundamental, indivisible, uncuttable constituents making up everything in the world around us?
Kind of like the essence of the absolute supreme.
The idea is like this. So imagine we look at a familiar object, just a candle and a holder, and imagine that we want to figure out what it is made of. So we go on a journey deep inside the object and examine the constituents. So deep inside, we all know, you go sufficiently far down, you have atoms. We also all know that atoms are not the end of the story. They have little electrons that swarm around a central nucleus.
Remember the idea of the triquetra and the arcs that swarm around the center? This is the animation you're watching for an atom with protons, electrons, and neutrons.
With neutrons and protons, even the neutrons and protons have smaller particles inside of them, known as quarks. That is where conventional ideas stop. Here is the new idea of string theory. Deep inside any of these particles, there is something else. The something else is this dancing filament of energy.
The dancing? You mean like the cosmic dance that Shiva does inside the circle? That can destroy or create reality? Multiple universes? Okay, I understand now.
Looks like a vibrating string. That's where the idea of string theory comes from. And just like the vibrating strings that you just saw on a cello can vibrate in different patterns, these can also vibrate in different patterns. They don't produce different...
You mean like a loom that creates strings of patterns? Oh, okay, I see.
Musical notes, rather they produce the different particles making up the world around us. So if these ideas are correct, this is what the ultra-microscopic landscape of the universe looks like. It's built up of a huge number of these little tiny filaments of vibrating energy, vibrating in different frequencies. The different frequencies produce the different particles. The different particles are responsible for all the richness in the world around us. And there you see unification. Because matter particles, electrons and quarks, radiation particles, photons, gravitons, are all built up from one entity. So matter and the forces of nature all are put together under the rubric of vibrating strings, and that's what we mean by a unified theory. Now here is the catch.
Now, listen closely.
When you study the mathematics of string theory, you find that it doesn't work in a universe that just has 3 dimensions of space. It doesn't work in a universe with 4 dimensions of space, nor 5, nor 6.
Will it work at all? How many dimensions does it take, Bob? Let's roll the wheel. Let's roll that Price is Right wheel and see how many dimensions it lands on. What's it going to take for these equations to have all these theories compiled on manure theories? What's it going to take for them all to actually come out as a shining, gleaming reality?
Finally, you can study the equations and show that it works only in a universe that has 10 dimensions of space.
Oh, you mean like this? You mean like this? 10 dimensions? You mean like this? It's all Gnostic Kabbalah, Hinduism, ancient Ma'at from Egypt. This is all nonsense, guys.
And 1 dimension of time. It leads us right back to this idea of Kaluza and Klein that our world, when appropriately described, has more dimensions than the ones that we see.
All theory, not proven.
So when we talk about the extra dimensions in string theory, it's not 1 extra dimension, as in the older ideas of Kaluza and Klein. This is what string theory says about the extra dimensions. They have a very rich, intertwined geometry. This is an example of something known.
Oh, interesting little animation here that's popping up. Inside these strings, we see, this interesting little animation. I wonder why it shows this.
Known as a Calabi-Yau shape. Name isn't
Keep saying Calabi-Yau and Kaluza and Klein. I think he keeps trying to say Kabbalah.
all that important, but as you can see, the extra dimensions fold in on themselves and intertwine in a very interesting shape, interesting structure.
Interesting indeed. This little animation of how this power works inside these rings, it folds in on itself and intertwines in this interesting shape and interesting structure. It's almost as if we've seen this somewhere before. I wonder, there it is. We saw it with Brahma. It's literally the lotus he's sitting on. Oh, look. That's the imagery they chose for the animation. Inside the grid, inside the rings, the Om, the creative power, that's the energy they chose.
The idea is that if this is what the extra dimensions look like, then the microscopic landscape of our universe all around us would look like this on the tiniest of scales. When you swing your hand, you'd be moving around these extra dimensions over and over again, but they're so small that we wouldn't know it. Strings themselves will be affected by the vibrational patterns and the geometry within which they are moving. So let me bring some strings into the story. And if you watch these little fellas vibrating around, they'll be here in a second right there, notice that the way they vibrate is affected by the geometry of the extra dimensions. This in many ways...
All right, so this is what these guys are this is what evolutionists and theorists, mathematical theorists and philosophical theorists, this is what they're famous for doing. They introduce an idea as theory. They say that word a few times, and then the next 20 minutes, they speak of it as if it's reality. I saw this in my son's science books when he was in 3rd and 4th grade as they introduced certain ideas. It's indoctrination. Yes, he went to public school back then. It's indoctrination. This is absolutely how they do it. This is the sophistry trick. This is the trickery. This is the shell game with the guy on the table with the ball and the cups that you pay $5 on the side of the streets in London. This is the same grift. They just basically, they say, yeah, these theories, this guy had this one theory, this other guy had this other theory. So we started investigating this, and then they couldn't figure it out. So they got together and they was like, well, our theories are bunk, but what if we put them together? Maybe we could figure something out if we put our bunk theories together. Yeah, yours is trash. Yours is trash. Let's put them all together and see if we can make something shiny out of all this trash. And so then they start with animations, the cartoons, the visualizations. They start putting images in front of you and say, well, what if this theory looked like this? And what if that theory looked like that? And if we just tweak it enough, we can make it actually look like it does something. And then they start talking about it like it does something. This is called indoctrination, guys.
Would be the first fundamental explanation for why the structure of the universe is the way it is.
Now, this is very interesting. He just said, if this would work, this would be the first fundamental explanation. Fundamental. Oh, you mean like, well, how's he using that word fundamental? Is he using that like in a base level scientific sense, or is this a pun? Is this like a double entendre? Is he's using it not only in a base level scientific sense, but like a fundamental, like 5,000 years ago, ancient Hindu fundamental explanation of the reality we live in? Because that's exactly what he's visualizing and literally describing. He's repeating Vedic mantras, showing visualizations from them, and calling it new science. You're being lied to. They're getting donation money from grants, from schools, from alumni. They're stealing people's money, and they're repackaging ancient philosophy and religion and telling you that it's scientific advancement.
In CERN, Geneva, Switzerland, a machine is being built called the Large Hadron Collider. It's a machine that will send particles around a tunnel, opposite directions, near the speed of light. Every so often, those particles will be aimed at each other, so there's a head-on collision. The hope is that if the collision has enough energy, it may eject some of the debris from the collision from our dimensions, forcing it to enter into the other dimensions. How would we know it? Well, we'll measure the amount of energy after the collision, compare it to the amount of energy before, and if there's less energy after the collision than before, this will be evidence that the energy has drifted away, and if it drifts away in the right pattern that we can calculate, this will be evidence that the extra dimensions are there. Let me show you that idea visually. So imagine we have
They got to use the big G.
a certain kind of particle. It's called a graviton. That's the kind of debris we.
But look at even their animation, guys. The big G in in Freemasonry, this big G is in the orb in the sky on their tracing board artwork, representing Gad, the god of fortune, the god of fate, which is what we see as a ancient Phoenician god, also called Ra. Inside of a sphere, it's hard to see it from this animation, and in the interior of that sphere is that grid-like pattern. And then around it is the energy, that electricity, the power to change reality. Or in this little minuscule scale animation, to create a different alternative reality.
Expect to be ejected out if the extra dimensions are real, but here's how the experiment will go. You take these particles, you slam them together, and if we are right, some of the energy of that collision will go into debris that flies off into these extra dimensions. So this is the kind of experiment that we'll be looking at in the next 5, 7 to 10 years or so, and if this experiment bears fruit, if we see that kind of particle ejected by noticing that there's less energy in our dimensions than when we began, this will show that the extra dimensions are real. And to me, this is a really remarkable story and a remarkable opportunity. Going back to Newton, with absolute space, didn't provide anything but an arena, a stage in which the events of the universe take place. Einstein comes along and says, well, space and time can warp and curve. That's what gravity is. And now, string theory comes along and says, yes.
All right, so you guys see how they're compounding on different people's unobserved theories. You know, talking about Newton, whom didn't like Brahe or Kepler's geocentric animations, but decided to go with the heliocentric because he's an occultist. And then here comes another occultist, Einstein, with another thought experiment based on something that does not exist, that physicists rejected at the time. And it's only because certain crowds have promoted Einstein throughout time to push general relativity as the actual mechanism for gravity, which involves this idea of space-time, which now opens the gate, opens the door for the entire Hindu theology to come through with all their descriptions and depictions. Now, if you're watching this from India, we love you. We want you to know the Savior of the world, the Son of God, right? We're not just trying to bash your ancestry, your culture. Look, I've got people in my deep ancestry that probably did not worship the creator of heaven and earth as I do today. So Today, I've given my heart to Christ, and we ask that you would too. Anyone across the world, sound my voice, worship the God of heaven and his son, the Messiah, your high priest of the covenant. He wants to give you forgiveness, atonement of sin, and resurrect you to eternal life, bring you into absolute truth and not all these thought experiments. These are labyrinths, like I said, mental labyrinths. Just like we talked about in the last episode about the physical labyrinths that they would build, that there was no way out of them. Demons chased you around to torment you until you finally died. In the same way, this is a mental labyrinth. There's no way out of this. This is not a real reality. There's no fruit that's going to bear from this. It's all lies. It's all conjecture. It's all theories. It's all stagecraft to trick you into believing that a specific God has power over the actual creator of the universe. So I'm not picking on Hinduism. Like I've said emphatically throughout this video, it's all connected. The Egyptians worship this too. The Akkadians, the Phoenicians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Greeks, they all worship this. This is the same idea they thought. I showed you clips from the idea of the Germanic Norse people that believed in Odin and Thor. They thought they could travel to different realms with the power of the lightning, right? From the triquetra to the Om. They spoke into the Om, the power that allowed him to travel. It's all the same symbolism in all these cultures. It's all there. So hopefully this is waking you up that yes, we can, as people groups, be born into a culture that's inherited lies. And in the United States and Western society, we've inherited massive amounts of lies for over 100 years. He's explaining literally back from Newton. He's giving you a trail, a historical chronology of the lies that we've inherited. And he's actually trying to summarize them for you quick so you can believe the new lie, because they all depend on each other.
Gravity, quantum mechanics, electromagnetism, all together in one package, but only if the universe has more dimensions than the ones that we see. And this is an experiment that may test for them in our lifetime.
Because we want to get into some actual scriptures, right? Like we try to do with these. We're showing you what the deceptions are. We're showing you what they're throwing at you. But now let's look at the truth. I think the truth is fascinating. The truth is what sets us free, not theories and mathematical equations that have to be augmented every 10 years. Not assuming there's vibrational strings and lotus designs that are flowing through all the particles in my hand as I wave my hand in the air. None of that stuff, right? But instead, I read in Daniel 7 something peculiar about the end times, and during the 42 months leading up to the coming of the Messiah, I see that it prophesies about the fourth kingdom, the beast who rules that kingdom. It says in Daniel 7:23 through 25, this is what he said. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on the earth, different from all the other kingdoms. It will devour the whole earth, trample it down, and crush it. The 10 horns of the 10 kings will rise from this kingdom, and after them another king, different from the earlier ones, will rise and subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High and oppress the saints of the Most High, intending to change the appointed times and laws. And the saints will be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. Now we correlate this to be the equivalent of Revelation 13, where the beast has 42 months to oppress the saints. What's he want to do? He wants to change the laws and the appointed time. What was Kala? The name for Kali, the derivative of Kali was Kala, based the root word for the goddess Kali, a version of Shiva who controlled time and reality, the appointed time. Revelation 13:4 and 5, as we read earlier, they worshiped the dragon, that's Brahma, that's Ra, whom the first and second beasts have authority under the dragon, because the dragon had given authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who's like the beast, who can wage war against it? The beast was given a mouth to speak arrogant and blasphemous words and to authority to act for 42 months. So our Heavenly Father tells us that many plans are in a man's heart, but the purpose of Yahweh will prevail. His purposes will prevail. So even though the beast who controls the fourth kingdom will think to change appointed times and laws, he'll think to. He doesn't actually get to.